which maybe makes it even scarier, probably. We really need to be careful how we are treating our technology. Pantheon is the hidden sci-fi gem you've been missing. Here's why it's a must-watch and what to add to your watch list if you're hooked. I recently watched Pantheon on Netflix and I loved it so much that I decided to dedicate a whole video to this criminally underrated masterpiece. It's an adult animated science fiction drama by AMC+. Let me give you a short plot summary, a few thoughts without any spoilers, and then I will clearly state when we are getting into major spoilers. Maddie, a bullied teen, starts receiving messages from a mysterious stranger. As she investigates, she discovers that the consciousness of her deceased father, David, was uploaded to the cloud through an experimental brain scan. She soon uncovers a larger conspiracy involving the Singularity and others like him. The reason why you might have missed it is because it was first released on AMC+, then made available on Prime Video, but exclusively in Australia and New Zealand, and this happened to Season 2. And only recently, Season 1 was released on Netflix. Who knows why they chose not to share both seasons. Another issue related to the release of the series itself is that it was cancelled halfway through the second season, meaning that they had to rearrange the story so that it would get an ending by Season 2. And I'm really impressed how they managed to give a great ending and wrap up everything despite this issue. It's a shame, and this show should be a must-watch, especially if you're into sci-fi, but not only, because the irony is that big corporations made Pantheon unavailable to most of the world, and as you'll see, this and related topics are present in the show. The messy release sounds just like what happened to Scavenger's Reign, which is a similar show to Pantheon in the sense that it's sci-fi, it's revolutionary, and any sci-fi lover would absolutely adore it. And yet, it wasn't made available to everybody. No spoilers yet, because I'm just mentioning the first episode, but I think that the school setting in episode 1 allows us to relate to the show in a very specific way, reminding me a lot of traditional anime from the 80s and 90s, for instance, playing with the nostalgia factor perhaps, but also misleading me, because whenever the series showed something that would be common in anime, I'd be a little perplexed, and that would be enough to take me out of the story for a few seconds, and you'll understand what I'm referring to in a section later in the video. But this is not traditional anime. The animation itself is good, but that's not the reason why you want to watch this show. For that, you might look into Arcane instead. But I mean, it was alright, I just wouldn't watch it specifically for the technique. You must watch this show if you're into cyberpunk, philosophy, conspiracy theories, ethics, corruption, AI, and here we're talking about specifically UI, uploaded intelligence, in which basically your consciousness is uploaded to the cloud, but also we're talking about warfare, family issues, and human relationships in general. Before getting to spoilers, let me recommend you several other sci-fi movies or shows that you might enjoy if you enjoyed Pantheon, or vice versa. If you enjoyed those, you will love Pantheon. It reminded me of Neon Genesis Evangelion, Foundation, Bicentennial Man, The Congress, and I will give you more details in the spoiler section about this one, which I hated watching, but it has some themes which really reminded me of Pantheon. Virtual Revolution, which I never heard anybody talk about for some reason. A much more popular one, which is similar to Virtual Revolution in some ways, is Ready Player One, but also the Prime Video series Upload, the Russian movie Coma, in some ways even Vesper, which I don't think is very well known, Downsizing, Ex Machina, and Equilibrium. Pantheon will shock you, surprise you. It's way, way, way better than you might expect. It even develops in ways I wasn't expecting, which doesn't happen very often. It has several fascinating plot lines, and it somehow manages to develop them all and make them all intriguing. It's one of those shows in which everything ultimately makes sense, and that's very satisfying. And if the fact that it is animated stops you, I hope the list of movies or shows that I just mentioned will encourage you to give Pantheon a go, because you're truly missing out one of the best things I've seen in terms of sci-fi in recent years. And I watch a lot of movies and TV shows, and it's been maybe a week since I watched Pantheon, and I cannot stop thinking about it, even while watching something else. So just do me a favor and do yourself a favor. Go ahead, watch it, and then come back, because I need to discuss with you some of these points that I will talk about in the spoiler section. So this is your sign. Leave if you haven't watched Pantheon yet. Stay if, just like me, you need to talk about this show with someone. One of the very first things I noticed was the dialogue. It was a bit complex, sometimes blatant, but I understand, because there was a lot of detail, so it made some of the dialogue a bit unrealistic, even scholarly. But it definitely makes sense because it's sci-fi, and they really needed us viewers to understand what was going on, as well as the complex notions that you need to understand what's happening in the show. And I saw some reviews by software engineers and even scientists who praised this series for its plausible science and technology, because it's not too distant from what we have in our hands now, and it's not all up in the air. As I said, there are so many different themes in this show, and that's also why I praise Pantheon, because for once I was challenged. There were so many things I could think of afterwards or while watching, and it wasn't just a viewing experience that ends like that. Either I'm satisfied or not, it doesn't really matter. The time has passed. And about time, there are some time jumps, which personally I find disorienting, but I know that in Pantheon, time jumps were partially justified by Moore's law, and there even was foreshadowing in the first episodes. But as I'm viewing a show, I still struggle to get used to the new world that we are shown. No matter how long has passed, I still need some time to understand, oh, but these are the main differences and these are the implications. And what does that mean for the main characters and for the overall plot? It takes me a little bit to adjust. But also I simply wish I could explore more, because I love world building. And this feature specifically, so the time jumps, reminded me of a really unpleasant viewing experience, which was when I watched The Congress, and I do not recommend you watch it. Maybe just look for some reviews and videos about it, because it's excruciatingly slow and boring. And so if you could cut the movie in half, maybe it would be enjoyable, I don't know. And it's a live action animation, and the animated part begins in the moment in which the main character takes a drug that allows them to join this congress, in which everybody is using the same drug. And the idea is that this world, this animated world, which is all in the minds of the people using the drug, is more or less like the cloud in Pantheon. And after a while, there's a time jump in which the use and abuse of this drug is exponential, so much that the entire world has changed. The rules of that world in the Congress have changed, and the main character needs to adapt again. So this specific moment reminded me of this movie. But there are other similar concepts. In the Congress specifically, the commentary is about the entertainment industry, more or less like Brave New World, which is another great sci-fi book. I watched a series that is buried somewhere because nobody ever talked about it. Either way, Brave New World, in which again you take this drug and the entire life of the characters is pleasure and nothing else. Another parallel between Pantheon and the Congress is that in the Congress, actors are digitally scanned and are selling their own identity to big corporations. So they no longer have any power on the decisions that the uploaded image make. And later in the movie, the loss of identity goes way beyond that. So it's no longer about the image and the voice and whatever this image is used for. After the first time jump, the actual essence of a person can be distilled down into a chemical formula, meaning that actors can be bought and consumed, just like food. And this is what corporations are now asking the same actors who had given up their image and their identity. And yet another parallel is after yet another time jump, and we don't know how long has passed because at this point time has become subjective, and DNA profiles are all uploaded and can be searched for, much like in Pantheon after a jump or two. So the world in which people find themselves in the Congress becomes meaningless, just like in Brave New World, where you are consumed by drugs, by choice or force. And in this psychedelic world in the Congress, low-wage workers are replaced by robots, which is what we would expect. But it's not exactly how things are going for us right now. See AI taking creative jobs instead of repetitive and boring tasks. A parallel between Pantheon and Virtual Revolution is that in the latter, which is set in 2047, people spend all their time inside virtual worlds. And in this plot, we see terrorists who threaten the virtual world, much like what happens in Pantheon in Season 2. A similar one, actually, that I forgot, is Surrogates from 2009, in which humans live in isolation and interact through surrogate robots. Yet another fascinating sci-fi theme. Well, here's another movie, AI Artificial Intelligence, that explores similar topics as Pantheon does, in which we start seeing the problem of robots feeling something and wanting to be more human, or humans starting to love robots as if they were human. There were a couple of times in which I shouted at the screen. First, when Maddie got mad at Mist, and she said stuff like, "I wish we deleted you," and all those things you wouldn't say if it wasn't for rage. And I was there shouting, like, don't threat her like that. I mean, you will regret it. Exactly how I wouldn't shout at AI, or, you know, those people who just politely ask something to ChatGPT and then say thank you at the end, you know, stuff like that. Because at this point, we really need to be careful how we are treating our technology. And the second time I shouted at the screen was in Season 1, when Maddie was chatting to a stranger online. Not just because she was chatting with a stranger, which is something that I would not recommend, right? So she's a teenager, I wouldn't let her do it. But she also naively told her mother, as soon as her mother passed by, she saw what Maddie was doing and asked about it, and Maddie simply said what was going on. And I was like, what's this level of transparency and communication in a family? What's this thing I'm not familiar with? But good for her, because otherwise we wouldn't have had the entire plot, actually. And here are some things that I really loved about Pantheon. The colors and shapes of the northern lights used to show the Lords and David meeting Caspian. Another moment in which I was like, whoa, this is great, was when David thought of a logical and practical way to move the phone towards the computer. And this was in Season 1, because I was expecting some weird stuff, you know, something made up. They would be at some point justified by some odd explanation. And instead, it was so realistic. It basically used the vibration of the phone to move it. It was hilarious, and I mean, why not? It could be possible. It was a bit more up in the air the following action, which was on the computer itself to move the keyboard. But still, I was like, whoa, this is brilliant. And I also love that most of the science and engineering is close to real life, which maybe makes it even scarier, probably. But it also meant that I could understand it, instead of being super abstract, you know? And for the entire show, I kept thinking of the very first moments in the first episode, in which we meet Maddie and she says something like the other girls didn't realize what was happening in the exact moment in which the world changed. And I was there waiting for an answer the entire time until we get it. And I was so happy that they gave us closure for that specific point as well, because they could have also pretended like, yeah, it was at the very beginning, everybody forgot, right? And then thinking about animation, I told you it's not like the best one if we're talking about technique, just because you have Arcane, the Spider-Verse and others out there right now. But I loved how they portrayed a reality we cannot comprehend as humans. I mean, I love that Laurie was mocking David for his limited imagination in the very first hours or days in which we see him taking some kind of shape in this virtual world. But then once more UIs came into play, it looked like the series reduced the amount of variation in the portrayal of UIs, because they were basically characters. I mean, the Chinese ones looked like video game characters, but that was about it. In both seasons, when there was a fight between UIs, the potential of absurd, surreal portrayal was lost. And maybe there's a practical reason, maybe time constraints, too many characters, and it would become too messy for us to follow the plot. And just the most powerful ones seem to still be able to bend reality, while the others seem to be fighting in a really human way. So at that point, maybe it was meant to distinguish powerful UIs from others. I don't know. Maybe there's a practical explanation. But I was a little bit, not disappointed, but I loved so much the very beginning in which we see all kinds of shapes and dimensions in which UIs can move. I was hoping for more, and probably that's one of the things we lost once they decided to cancel the show, because this could have gone for several seasons, and in that way we would have had more time to explore each character and to see more variation in the portrayal, I think. About the characters, I mean, they are all well-rounded and credible. Holstrom is the obvious parallel with Steve Jobs or any CEO, admired, genius, billionaire and whatnot. And having exact names in the real world and faces that would match Holstrom's and fit into this character is terrifying and makes this show even closer to reality. See corporate cults, for instance. There was a movie about this. If I can find it, I will put it up here. And just as terrifying, which is why I'm saying everybody should watch this show for several reasons, and this is one of those. You see the reaction of governments or companies or corporations, and it's disheartening, but so close to reality, because we saw what happened during the pandemic, right? And the pandemic is mentioned during the show itself. Pantheon was made during the pandemic, all remotely, and that's maybe what I wasn't expecting. The fact that the main plot followed what would actually happen, instead of giving us some kind of fantasy or a utopia. It really felt like there is no hope for humans, in a way, even though the final message is completely different from this one. But if you look at the governments, the money involved and all the corporations, you really feel hopeless. And about another character, Chanda, I wondered why they highlighted him in the first episode, because they highlighted Maddie, the protagonist, Caspian, the second main character, and then Chanda, and he was set aside for a little bit and then had a longer interaction with the other main characters, but I was still expecting something more from his character or from his plotline. I don't know, probably just because they literally put his name as if he was the main thing after the two main characters. But, I mean, he was and he wasn't. A couple of really teeny tiny things that I just want to mention because otherwise it's all perfect, it all sounds immaculate. But there were a couple of things I was not too happy about, and this is what I was referring to at the beginning when I said that the anime nostalgia was a bit misleading for me, because there was some unexpected nudity or something close to nudity, and I don't know if I'm not too used to adult animation, and that's why the couple of scenes in which you see too much skin annoyed me, because I was literally distracted and I thought you drawn these characters and these moments, you could have covered these people a little bit more, because it was completely unnecessary. But that's really a teeny tiny thing, and it happens a couple of times. And then something I didn't realize while I was watching, because to me the time passing wasn't super clear, or perhaps because I thought, oh, maybe I missed the moment in which they said the age of Maddie, because I thought she was older. But she was 14 and Caspian was 17 when they met, and I mean, that was unnecessary. The fact that in the end there was underage sex and a teen pregnancy. I mean, really? She could have been a little bit older. And the same goes for Caspian, for their relationship to be a bit more acceptable. And there's literally one thing I would have done differently. And again, I'm really picky at this point, because if you compare this with so many other sci-fis, some of these I mentioned in this review already, this is still one of the best. But if I were to change something, it would be the fact that it's all about love in the end. Is this lazy? Maybe the entire show's concept went already too far and needed to add family and love to connect with the audience and make us care. I mean, it's possible. And the gestalt missing piece, I'm referring to an organized whole that is perceived as more than the sum of its parts, gestalt, is ultimately love and the relationships humans had before being uploaded. And those are what make the upload complete. And yeah, alright, but I don't know if you can call it a trope, but if so, it's a trope I don't like. I could keep going for hours because I really liked how Pantheon made me feel and think, and so many connections that I just showed you with other shows and other themes, and the potential of animation instead of having a live action for the same topics. There are so many things to discuss, but I'll stop here for now. And please, if you watched it, if you haven't, why are you here? But if you watched it, I need to know what you think about it. If you enjoyed it, why, which were the points that really made you think and gave you something to take away. Please let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to share it with others, because everybody needs to watch Pantheon. Now that you watched this review, check out my best and most surprising TV shows and movies of 2024. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.